Since the year 1998, the Tibet Museum has been playing an instrumental role in documenting, preserving, exhibiting Tibet's history, culture, and present situation in Tibet and in exile. Located in Kangchen Kishong, the seat of the Central Tibetan Administration, the Tibet Museum is more than a space for exhibitions, installations, and lectures. It also provides a platform for educational activities and special events, producing museum kits, catalogs, and other publications, and also undertakes traveling exhibitions. Nicole and Isa are among the individuals whose association with the Tibet Museum in its initial phase has been inspirational and instrumental. They have both provided their assistance in need assessment research, content planning, and development of strategies. Today, Nicole and Isa are here in Dharamshala, and we are thrilled to have you both in our studio.
Thank you. Thank you.
So take us back to the time when you first heard about Tibet or the Tibet Museum, and how you came into association with the Tibet Museum.
We were introduced to Tashi through a mutual friend at the moment that he was beginning to reconceptualize the museum for its opening here at the CTA headquarters. And he had every question about the museum, and we entered into what has become a very long conversation with him about what the objectives and goals of the museum would be, and how we might help brainstorm both those things.
Yeah. How about you, Nicole? What made you associate with Tibet Museum?
Isa and I have collaborated before on other projects, and we've worked together and taught students together and worked in the museum studies program at the university together. So working together on this project and working with Tashi is something that we're so happy to continue with.
So museums today are more relevant than it has ever been, right? And you have visualized what Tibet Museum would be. You never knew that it would be completed in 2022 and it will look this way now. And you have both you are now coming back to Dharamsala after 4 years. So how does it make you feel now when you look at this completed project?
It makes me feel a little in awe of all the work that the museum staff accomplished in a very short time. But the conversations and the vision of the museum is as beautifully realized as it could possibly be. It was quite overwhelming to go and visit the space and see the story retold, and with all the new themes and all the new images and the very clear telling of the history and current situation of the Tibetan people. Very impressive. It makes me feel impressed.
How different is it from what you have visualized earlier?
Well, for me, I think it's important to show that the culture is still alive. A lot of museums, the problem is they just show the culture at a moment in time, and this museum has really shown us that there's hope for the future of Tibetans in the world, and to show what the current situation is, as Isa said. So I think that's the most important part of the museum, and that's what I'm most impressed of, is there's the future growth is there.
Isa, do you think this museum is completely different from what other museums you have been to?
Well, I think it's very much in the vanguard of cutting-edge museum practice, in the sense that it represents a very diverse range of opinions, but it also really directly engages the visitors to the museum, asking them not just to passively learn, but also to think about their own role in relationship to this community, whether they're Tibetan visitors or visitors from within India or international visitors. I think that what surprised me most on visiting the museum was what a beautiful job the museum team has done incorporating individual personal stories across the entire narrative of the exhibition.
As a museum professional, I'm really impressed with the professionalism of the museum, like tiny details like temperature and humidity and the way the text is displayed and the objects are displayed. I look at those details every time I go to a museum. And I would say this museum is, one of the top ones that I've been to. I mean, and I've been traveling around the world, so it's really impressive from the museum standpoint.
Good to know. So due to rise of technology over the last many years, what it means to be a museum has been questioned and challenged over the time, right? And modern technology is now transforming museums from the space of looking and learning to space of learning and educating. So, it has become a space of engagement as well. What areas do you see that Tibet Museum can expand and improve in future?
Technology is great, and I think the museum does a wonderful job of incorporating moving images and sound and a sense of dynamism in the space. But one of the things that's so beautiful about the museum is the non-technical aspects of it, the incorporation of objects from the history of the diaspora and the history of the Tibetan community. So I think to continue to think about that balance as they have temporary exhibitions and as they think about the permanent collection, that's the big challenge. How to be new and exciting, but also how to really be faithful to the things and the individual stories that have brought the community to where it is right now. And also that push people to think about how they can contribute to supporting the community going forward.
You know, seeing a museum online, nothing can replace actually going to the museum and seeing the objects and seeing tiny details that you can't see online, seeing size and even sometimes smelling things in the museum. So I think that's the most important aspect of growth in the museum is reminding people they need to come and be in the space to really understand the story and what's going on. Museums don't work in a vacuum, so I think we're going to continue to have conversations. Museums always work together. We're a pretty small family.
Yeah.
So having these conversations and learning from each other, I know we have learned from Tashi and his team a lot as well. So.
You have visited both the museums, the old Tibet Museum that used to be in McLeodganj and the one that is in Kangchen Kishon now. So what kind of impact it had on you when you first visited the Tibet Museum?
It's a very emotional impact. The original Tibet Museum was focused primarily on the difficult history of the Tibetan community, the factors that led to the exile, the experience of His Holiness in exile and leading the community into exile, and the persistent difficulties that the Tibetan community faces. So I would say it was a very emotional experience. It also the question with telling that kind of a story is how you balance an understanding of the difficulties of the past with hope for the future, and in particular in relationship to the messages that His Holiness speaks when he travels around the world. I think the new museum does a beautiful job of that, but visiting the original Tibet Museum gave me a deep appreciation for the difficulties the community has faced, and also for the resilience that the people have shown.
For me, I think the previous museum, the perspective that it was told from was more neutral, or it was just telling the story. And the new museum does it really well, telling it from the Tibetan story. The words are written, our story, or I am Tibetan. And I think that's really important because you start to feel what it means, and that's the easiest and the best way to understand what it means to be Tibetan.
Yeah, and absolutely, that's what Tibet Museum aspired to do, to remember the past and then give strength to the future. And we wish you a very good stay in Dharamsala, and thank you for coming to our studio and taking your time out for this interview. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Isa.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So museums are just as important to the future as the future is to museums. The Tibet Museum reflects Tibet's ancient and recent past and aspires to provide strength, guidance, and hope for the future. This was our edition of In Conversation with Tibettv on two key individuals who are source of inspiration and have in many ways contributed to the conceptualization of the Tibet Museum that we see today.